Hi, this is Kevin Trainer. Welcome to my tutorial on creating a context diagram with visual paradigm. I'm recording this for the students in my systems analysis class. And you may recall that we decided to do these tutorials using visual paradigm for the students who couldn't use the free copy of Microsoft Visio that was available for Windows. So I'm assuming that if you're here, you're a person who uses a Mac, and you didn't want to create a virtual machine to run Visio. And so you've taken me up on my offer to use Visual Paradigm. So I'm showing it to you on my Mac. I've had one snag though. What I wanted us to be using was the free version of Visual Paradigm, which is called Visual Paradigm Community Edition. And when I went there, I couldn't find a way to make it do data flow diagrams. And perhaps there is a way that I'm just not seeing, but as of right now, I can't get it to work. So what have I done? Well, I've downloaded the paid version of Visual Paradigm, and I've asked for a 30-day evaluation copy. And that's what we see right here. Okay, and I've loaded it up, and if we look at the about for it, we'll see that I've got version 13.2. And as you can see, it's an evaluation that's going to expire in 29 days. Okay. The other thing that I have configured here is I'm using the classic user interface. So if you go up to the menu and you click on Visual Paradigm in OS X and choose Preferences, and then you come down and you go to the Appearances tab. There are two versions of the user interface, Sleek and Classic. And Classic is the one I've always used, and on top of that, it's the only one where I can find the data flow diagrams at this point. Why they don't seem to be apparent in Sleek is beyond me, but that's it. So that's how you can find your way to the tools I'm currently using. Okay. For the rest of the tutorials in my course, I'm going to use Community Edition because those are all diagrams that can be done with Community Edition. Okay. Now, the next thing I want to do is I want to give us a little bit of room to work on our diagramming. So this ORM view I don't need. Logical view I don't need. Class repository, model explorer, diagram navigator. I don't think I need any of those things over there. Don't need teamwork files. Don't need my stencil. I'm trying to close everything over there. Okay, closed everything over there. Now I've got more real estate to work with. Okay, so how do I start a data flow diagram? Well, I go up to the menu bar and I find business, and I take the drop down, and over the third thing is data flow diagram, and that's what we want. So pick that. Okay, and so you get the classic diagram editor window, and then on the left side you get the palette with all of the shapes on it that we're going to use. So a context diagram has on it the following things. It has on it one process, which represents the system as a whole. Okay, so in our case, we have just one process. It's the system. We also have these external entities. That's what I like to call them, and that's what they're called here in this diagrammer. Okay, and I'm going to say that when we get done here, we're going to have 3 external entities. Okay, and we're going to have let's put one down here, and we're going to have one process. Okay, so what's this all about? Well, data flow diagramming is a method that's been around for 30, 40 years, certainly 35. I've been using it for 35. And it's it's a process-oriented way to describe what your system does. The processes are represented by this process symbol that we see in the middle here. This is the new version of the notation, a notation made popular by Gain and Sarson. So we have processes. If we're talking about a context diagram, it's got one process. The whole system is seen as one process. Okay. And the external entities are typically users, either user people, user roles, user organizations, or other systems that interact with our system. So we can have a user of our system that is a system. Okay, so those are what external entities are. And we're eventually going to be showing data flows, and let's show them. They go from one of the external entities to our process or system, or the other way around. They're always unidirectional. Okay, there's a bidirectional version that they actually show here, but they never appear on a context diagram. Okay, so those are all the pieces that we're going to be using, except for some text. And let's get into the example that we're going to do. So the example that we're going to do is for a attendance reporting system. I do most of my teaching up at the University of Wisconsin Milwaukee, UWM, at the I school there, the information school, at which we call SOAS. And at SOAS, at least for our undergraduates, we require that if they have an on-campus class, that they come to class and they sign in. So it's typical for a lecturer like me to have a sign-in sheet every time we come to class, and for students to line up and sign it. And it's for somebody who has an IT kind of point of view, this doesn't seem very attractive. It's very manual. I have to make up the lists with the proper people on them. That's a little bit hard at the beginning of the semester when we're having add drop, right? On top of that, I have to remember to bring them to class. I have to write the date on them. I have to remember to get everybody to sign them. Students have to remember to sign them. Sometimes they'll come in late or they're in a hurry and they'll forget to sign them, and then they'll want to come sign them later or do something like that. And then I have to hang on to them, and of course I have to tabulate them at the end of the semester. So it's kind of headache. So my idea is, let's do this with a little web application. Okay, and here's how it's going to work. As the instructor, I'm going to set up the system. At the beginning of the semester, I'm going to identify the course, and I'm going to identify the students, and I'm going to identify when the course is going to be meeting, then the students are going to be able to log in during class, okay, and they're going to be able to say that they're there. All right. Now we do have the problem that unless I restrict the IP address or something like that, you could sign in from home, right? And this isn't an online course. So I've had some thoughts about that. We could restrict the IP addresses, but then you wouldn't be able to do it from your tablet or your phone. Typically, I do teach in a lab where everybody has a machine in front of them, so I might do that. The other thing I thought of is having some part of the application that displays a time-sensitive password on the board. And when students go to log in to the class, they have to put the password that is live right now in the classroom. That has to be a part of what they enter. So I don't have that completely worked out yet, but hopefully we're going to have a design with that feature that that makes the compliance work well. So the student needs to be able to log their attendance. The instructor needs to be able to set up the class and set up the students. Both the student and the instructor have to get access to the system. So I envision there being a system administrator who has to give access to the instructor and to the students. Okay. And then both the students and the instructor need to get some kind of reports out of the system so they can see what the attendance has been. The use case for the instructor is, let's say we're in the middle of the semester and we want to make sure we haven't lost anybody, or we want to give a couple of people a pep talk that they ought to come more often. Or maybe we're at the end of the semester and we're calculating the impact of attendance on grades. So we want to see all of the attendance in kind of a summary way. Okay? And the student might want to know the same thing. They might want to know, well, how did I do at showing up at that class? All right, so that's the functionality that we're talking about, and that's what we're trying to express with our context diagram. And focusing on the context diagram again, I just want to point out that one of the major things that we get from the context diagram is it's a big picture kind of tool. Okay, it tells us who interacts with our system and what goes on when they're interacting. Okay, so the system is the process that is in the middle of the diagram. Okay, the who that interacts with it are these external entities, which again are people for the most part. So they are typically we might identify with the roles people play when they interact with the system. We could do it on a role basis. We could indicate what department these people work in. We could do that kind of stuff. The other thing is if we have a system that interacts with our system, we'll make that an external entity as well. And then how does the interaction go on? Well, these data flows are messages of a sort, okay? And the messages go in one direction or the other, okay? And we'll get to diagramming that in just a minute. Okay, so let's get started. So again, I've said that there's a single process. Let's make this process a little bigger. Typically, if there's only one process on the diagram, we want to be able to draw a lot of lines to it. So making it a little bigger is a good thing to do. And we just pull on the little controls at the corner and it becomes bigger. Okay, in more general data flow diagrams, lower level data flow diagrams, we put the name of the process on the process, but we're only doing context diagrams, the very top level diagram, and it's the name of the system that goes on here. So I'm calling this the attendance system. It just goes right on there, okay? And I'm always a little disappointed in the size of the type, no matter what the diagram is. So I'm going to highlight that type and right click, and somewhere I want to find a control that's going to allow me to make that a little bit bigger. And I am not seeing a control to do it. Let me go hunt for it. I'll be right back. Oh, I found it. So I'm going to highlight the text and I'm going to go up to the toolbar and click on Format. And it says it's regular 11 point, and I'm going to want this to be about 30 point. It's got 26 and 36. Let's try 36. See how that looks. Okay, I like the way that looks. Okay, so who are the entities that interact with our system? Well, I think I mentioned three. I talked about the instructor. I talked about the student, and I talked about the system admin. So what are we going to do? Well, let's go to each one of these and put a label on it. Instructor here. All right. And again, the type's a little small, so I'm going to format that. It's currently in 11 point, and let's put that in. Let's see, maybe 18 point. Let's see how that looks. Well, it doesn't quite fit. We're going to make it a little bigger. That's okay. Okay, now, interestingly, for instance, the Visio diagrammer always keeps these as squares. Okay, this one keeps them as a rectangle, and I think the official rule is it only has to be a rectangle. So that looks good. So that we have the instructor there. Let's have the student down here in the right corner, student, and do the same thing. Let's double click on that text, format it. Let's go up to 18. All right, this is looking pretty good. But we could use for that to be a little bigger too. Okay. And then let's have a system admin down here in the lower left. Okay, and let's get them up to 18 point type as well. Click on Format, pick 18 point, say OK. All right, and again, we're going to probably have to give it a little more real estate if we want something to look that good. Okay. So let's give ourselves as much room as we can, and you'll see why we need it in a minute, because what we want to do is we want to show all of the interaction. In fact, we're going to want to make these a little more square. I think not completely square, but let's make them a little more square-ish. We want a lot of places for the lines to attach to the box. That's what we're looking for. Okay. So on a practical basis, that helps. And this is kind of ugly because it's not at right angles. Let's get that up to the top. All right. Let's get these out. Ooh. Guess we want to pull that. So far, I'm liking the diagrammer here. There's a lot of times I didn't really like this tool, but they have steadily improved the diagrammer. Okay, so let's see. So the instructor has to set up the class. They have to say what's the name of the class, what's the semester, all of that kind of stuff. Okay. Maybe what are the meeting times, all that kind of stuff. Let's say that's one transaction. Okay. Now it could be three, but let's say it's just one because we want to simplify. So let's say that the instructor is going to send to the system a class setup request. All right. And again, it's probably an 11-point type, and I like these up at about 14. Okay. Well, that looks pretty good. Okay. Now, I just want to point out this is a noun. Okay, so data flows are always nouns. The name of the system is always a noun. Okay. Now, people get confused fairly often, and they think, well, if the instructor is going to interact with the system, then that's action. So they start thinking verb, right? Well, that's not how data flow diagrams work. What we're trying to do is identify the information that's being sent. Okay, so what's the noun that gets sent when that verb happens? Well, it's a class setup request. Okay, so then the attendance system is going to set up the class. Okay, and usually it sends back some kind of confirmation. Class setup confirmation. And let's get it into 14-point type. And there we go. All right. So, and again, class setup confirmation is a data flow. It goes in only one direction. I know there is a control over here on the in the palette that says bidirectional data flow, but we don't have any bidirectional data flows on a context diagram. They only go in one direction. You have to be explicit about each one. Okay, and they're both nouns. Okay, and the name of the system is a noun, and the name of an external entity is a noun as well. So we're very short on verbs here. All the verbs are implicit. Okay. Now the other thing I want to point out is that there's a cycle here. Okay. So the instructor wants to set up a class. She sends a class setup request into the system, and she knows it has happened when she gets the confirmation back. Okay, so this complete cycle of interaction is a typical construct that we're likely to see over and over again in our design. Okay. Now, what kind of an application is this going to be? Well, in true data flow diagramming, structured analysis style, we would try to not decide exactly what tools we were going to use to implement this until we absolutely had to. So we wanted this to be kind of general. All right. Now, how do I envision this? I envision this as a web application. So a class setup request is probably one big long form. Okay. With the submit button. Okay. And what's a class setup confirmation look like? Well, it's probably an HTML page that comes back and says, okay, I set the class up. Here's what I know about this class. Okay. Now, what we used to do in the old days when we were using data flow diagrams as our major systems analysis tool is we would have, backing up our diagram, we'd have this thing called a data dictionary. And so we would list out each of the data flows, and we would identify all the data elements that occurred on the data flow. Now, we have some other places that we're going to do that in our class, so we're not going to stop and take the time to create a dictionary for our context diagram, but that's what we would have done if this was our main systems analysis tool. This is the way that we're using it. It's a broad tool in which we can show the scope of the system, who are the users that interact with the system, and what work goes back and forth between the users and the system. That's a great way to understand the scope of the project that we have at hand. Okay, so let's do another one from the instructor. So far, the instructor has set the class up, but he hasn't really told the system about any of the students in the class. So now we've got to decide, does the instructor want to send a list of all the students all at once? Or does the instructor want some kind of a unit of request where they could request one student be put into the system, one at a time? Well, there'd be more submits if they did them one at a time. But it certainly would be more flexible. It certainly would be helpful when we get to kind of add drops and those kinds of things. So I've decided that we're going to have, again, we're going to come over, click on data flow, click on instructor, take it down here. Okay, and now we're going to put an elbow into it. Okay, something like this. I like the way this works. So let's say that having a person added to the class or changing their name or deleting them from the class, that's a registration. Okay? So let's say that the instructor sends in, I'm going to call it add, change, delete registration. That's how we get a registration of a student. Okay? And maybe that's a little too grouped for some people. I could see the argument for that, but I'm trying to simplify. Okay, so what happens? We send in a request. We get back a response. Okay? So let's draw the data flow that comes back. It starts with the system. It goes to the instructor. Now let's put a little elbow into it. Again, I'm really liking the way this works. Double click. I'm going to call this a registration change confirmation. Looks pretty good. Let's highlight that text, click on Format, put it into 14-point type, good as gold. Okay, so if you see this circuit that goes on between each of the external entities in the system, you're going to see a pattern here, okay? It's rare that we have one-way communication. Well-designed systems always have some feedback. If for no other reason, we know if we've had some kind of failure, right? Even users of our system who are other systems, if they send a request, ideally they'd like to know that it's been acted on. Okay, they'd like to get some kind of confirmation back. So this kind of cyclical design is classic. Okay, and you really can't go wrong with it. Okay, so the other thing that we said that the instructor wanted to be able to do is we wanted we wanted her to be able to ask for a summary report so she could find out which of the students had attended which of the class meetings, and maybe some overall totals per student, right? So we're going to call that a summary report. And of course, how you get that? Well, you have to tell the system you want it. Let's send a request. Okay. And double click on the line here and say this is a summary report request. Very good. And let's go up and format that into 14-point type. I'm liking that. Okay. And do we get a confirmation back? No, we get the report back. Oh yeah, we're really getting real output. It's not just confirmation output, it's really usable output. So what's coming back is a summary report. So again, let's do another data flow. Remember, they always go in one direction. It's from the system to the instructor. And let's do something like that. Okay. And let's call it a summary report. And double click on that text to highlight it, click the formatter, put it into 14-point type, and we're good to go. There we are. Not too shabby. Not too shabby at all. So what I typically do, and this is what I would have you do, is here we're brainstorming, okay? We're saying, okay, the user, the external entity, is an instructor. They're interacting with the system. What would instructors want to do? What kind of use cases would they have for the system? Okay? Now, as we move in through the course, we're going to learn about use cases and how to think in terms of use cases and how to document them. Basically, a use case is a way that the user uses the system to accomplish part of their job. Okay, and so what have we got here? Well, part of the job is setting up the class. Part of the job is making sure that the students are registered in the system, and part of the job is requesting the output. Okay, so that this system is going to help this external entity with those three things. All right, so let's clean this up a bit. Okay, and how am I going to clean it up? I'm going to make this yet a little bigger, and then I'm going to try to shorten these guys up such that there's room for diagramming at the bottom. Okay, so we need some room for the sysadmin to interact with the system. Okay, that look pretty good? Okay, and maybe we've got this guy rolling over there. Maybe we want to be a little bit better like that. Okay, it's not perfect, but it's pretty good. All right, so the system admin. Let's talk about them. Okay, the system admin is, again, the way I'm setting up these external entities, they're very role-oriented, and there's a reason for that. In a week or so, when we get to use cases, we're going to learn about these things that use cases have called actors. And actors are very role-oriented. And actors and external entities, well, they're kind of very similar concepts. So what's happened is, in my later years, as I've begun to use the use cases, I'm kind of looking ahead to my use cases. And so my external entities, tend to match up with the roles that I identify for actors when I get to use cases. So there's sort of a bias. I'm not sure that I had things that quite so role-centric 30 years ago when I was doing this kind of analysis. But okay, so the instructor has to be able to use the system. The student has to be able to use the system. So the system administrator has to send some kind of a request to authorize the use of the system by some user. So how's that going to work? Well, it's the data flow again. So from sysadmin, click on that, to attendance system, click on that. And a lot of times it's good to have these flow circles go in the same direction all the time. Okay, so we've got this here. And what's going on? Well, we're going to have an authorization request. Okay, so authorization request. Okay, this is a request to authorize a user. And let's put that in 14-point type 2. Okay. All right. And then we're going to have a confirmation. Now, this is sort of an interesting question that comes up. Okay, we all know, or most of us do, that in a system, we could request to authorize a user, and it could work out well and it could work out badly. Okay, so you could see, you could say, that you might have a confirmation, or you might have a refusal, or you might come up with some kind of an overall concept like response that would either be a confirmation or a refusal. There's a tradition, at least when we first begin these, and we're only going to use these to begin our project. There's a tradition of trying to show the good case. Okay, so what happens in the good case? Well, in the good case, we send an authorization request, and everything goes well, and we get an authorization confirmation. So that's what we're going to show. It's a bit of a simplification, but there's a tradition here that says that's where we're going to get most of the value from the diagram. So let's do another data flow. Click and load the data flow. From attendance, click on that. To sysadmin, click on that. Let's put an elbow in it, like this. That's looking good. Yeah, maybe like that. Okay, that looks good to me. And what's this? Well, this is an authorization confirmation. Okay, let's put that into 14-point type as well. There it goes. Looks good. Okay, so now we have enough information to bring up a big issue. Okay, and here's the issue. We have two external entities. We have two users, two user roles. Okay, the instructor and the system admin. Do they interact with each other? Let's think about that. Well, the instructor is probably going to have to tell the system admin, well, I need you to authorize me for the system, right? Okay, then the system will authorize the instructor, and then the instructor can access the system. Well, do they just continue to try? Do they wait for an email from the system admin? Does the system admin work in the same office and they just say, Kevin, you can use the system now. I've gotten you authorization. Or is there some kind of a message that goes on through the attendance system that informs the instructor that they're now authorized to use the system? And do we show any of these in the diagram? And the answer is we only show work that's moderated by the system. So if the system admin and the instructor communicate at the water fountain, or they walk into each other's office, or they send emails to each other, or they send snail mail to each other, or they tell a friend to tell a friend, that doesn't show up on the diagram at all. As a result, we never see any data flow arrows that go directly from external entity to external entity. That's not saying that they don't interact with each other. We're just saying it's not pertinent to our system. It's not part of our system. It's not within the scope of our work. Okay, so even though there could be lots of information flowing between the instructor and the system admin, we're only going to show it if it's moderated by the system. And if it's moderated by the system, well, then it goes through the system. Okay, so if the system, we're going to tell the instructor when they're authorized, well, we would see that flow from the system to the instructor, right? I'm not showing that. And that's because I've made the decision that our system's not going to be that fancy. Okay? That's a decision on the scope of the system. When you're defining this scope, it's what are the functions going to be and who's going to be able to use the functions. Okay? And I've decided that we don't tell the instructor or the student when they're authorized. That's got to be worked out with the system admin. Let's just assume that they're using email. It doesn't appear on here because it's not part of the automated system. Okay? That's a project management scope decision. Okay? That's a big part of what we express in these kinds of diagrams. So when you review these with the stakeholders, you have to say, look, I want you to look at the diagram with me because this is everything the system does. So let's walk through this and this and this. Was there anything else that you were expecting that you don't see here? And then you might say, well, what about the part where the system notifies the instructor or the student that they have access? You say, oh, no, we've decided that that's going to be done outside the system. That's going to be done with email. Oh, okay. Or, oh, no, that has to be in. Well, then we need to draw some more data flows, don't we? Because there's more functionality in the system than we were assuming. So it's really what you see is what you get. If it's not explicitly here, it doesn't happen. And we only show work moderated by the system, and the individual external entities can have all kinds of interactions with each other directly or moderated by some other system. It doesn't show up on our diagram. Okay? All right, so let's finish this up by doing the student. Okay? So what can the student do? Well, if you remember, we said that one of the major things the student does is that they log in when they get to class and they make a report that they've attended. So let's have the student send a data flow to the system. Student to system. All right, let's put an elbow into that. I'm loving this diagrammer, by the way. This thing is pretty easy to use. Okay. And let's call this an attendance report. This is how they report that they attended. All right, double click on that, go up and hit format, turn it into 14-point type. All right, that's good. All right, so what happens when the student sends in an attendance report? Well, a lot of people would say, well, it just accepts it. How does a student know it's been accepted? Good design says we send some kind of confirmation back. It might just be a short web page that says attendance recorded. Okay, that'd be fine. So what we need is we need some kind of confirmation to come back. So the data flows from system to student. All right, pull a nice elbow into this one. Okay, and let's say this is an attendance report confirmation. And in my class, we're not going to go and create a data dictionary that defines the information that's on each of our data flows. But certainly, if one were rigorously committed to data flow diagramming, that would be the next step after you complete the diagram. But that we're not going that far. Okay. All right. So again, we've got a cycle, right? All right. That sounds good. Let's think about what else happens. Well, the student would like to get the same information that the instructor is able to get. Oh, so maybe they could just get a summary report. All right, let's take a look at that. So how would they get that? Well, I'm thinking that the kind of interaction that the student is going to have with respect to reporting is going to be a lot like the instructor has, but the instructor, when the instructor requests a summary report, she's probably requesting it for all the students, whereas when the student requests it, it's just for that individual student. Okay, well, for right now, let's just say it's a summary report. Later on, we might decide that it needs another name, but let's send a summary report request from the student. Whoa. Report request, going to come from the student. Select that type and make it 14 point. Looking good. All right, and then let's have a report come back from the system. Again, we don't really need to just send a confirmation when we have a real live useful data stream coming back, and that's what's been asked for. So let's just say we get back a summary report. And let's get the type up to 14 points on that one too. Alrighty. Okay, and so let's kind of clean this up. This is an interesting diagrammer in that it allows you to align things a bit. So let's align system admin with that. Let's align this line with that one. That looks good. This one here looks a little odd. Maybe put that there. Maybe take these and move them in a bit so they don't look so extreme out there to the right. This is really kind of artwork more than anything else. Okay? And this is pretty typically what we have. Okay? Now, let's go through the hallmarks of a good context diagram. One, it shows your system as the process and only your system. If there's another system that interacts with it, it shows up as an external entity. And it sends flows in and it gets flows back. The external entities are the things that interact with the system, either people or other systems. Um, the name of the system is usually a noun. Okay, the name of the external entities, nouns. And then the data flows that go back and forth between the system and the external entities, they have names that are nouns as well, even though there's action involved. Okay? We're not showing the action, we're showing what moves when the action happens. Okay? So it's a noun. Nouns, nouns, nouns. All right. That's that. Now, the only other thing I like to do is I sometimes like to just put the words context diagram on here. And let me go find that in a second. I'll show you how to do it. I bet you thought I couldn't find that. Well, I did. It's just another one of the tools on the palette. So if we roll down on the palette all the way down, the next to the last one is text. So click on that to load it up. Take it out here on the diagram. Give ourselves a box. Okay. Double click in the middle and then say that we want to call this context diagram. Okay. And let's see what we can do. Let's format wise. Let's say that we want it to be 36. We want it to be bold. Let's see what that looks like. Context diagram. Okay, it's not bad. Let's make it a little bit longer. Okay, it could probably be fancier than this, but this is getting the job done. Okay, it's not perfect, but it's going to get the job done. All right, so I could be a little better artist, but this is a good enough artist for the kind of work that we're doing in my class. Neat, readable, consistent. Okay, so we're going to save this. So what would I call this? Well, I'm going to say I'm going to save a project. So save project as. A project includes a diagram. I'm going to go to Documents, and I'm going to put mine right in my courseware development area. And this is going into the examples for context diagram. And I'm going to call this attendance system visual paradigm context diagram. Okay, so we got that. So we've saved that. And then we're going to go up to the menu up at the top of the screen, click on File, and we want to export. Okay, and we're going to want to take the active diagram as image. And how do I know this? Well, because I do it a lot. Okay, and so what do I want to do? I want it to be a PDF, so that's good. I don't want that name. I don't like that name there. Let's go over to, that's my username. Here's Documents. And somewhere I've got courseware development. In here, examples, context diagram. And I'm going to call this, what What am I going to call it? Well, the same thing. Attendance system. Well, what I typically would do for my course is I would do the following thing. I would put my last name, trainer, and then I'd say Kevin, and I would say skills practice, context diagram. Okay, and I would save it like that. And it's being exported. What do I want to do? Do I want to open the file? Yeah, let's open the file. And this is good. I have a thing that says visual paradigm evaluation copy all over it. It's watermarked all over it. That's going to be fine for my class for this one assignment where we had to use the evaluation copy. It's a little distracting. Okay, but because we made the type big, okay, you can read this diagram just fine even with its extreme watermarking that you get from this crippleware version. All right, so that's it. For the rest of the semester, I think we're going to be able to use the Community Edition, which is going to have watermarking, but nothing like the watermarking that you're going to see from the evaluation copy. Because all the rest of the diagrams are available in the free version. So, good luck on your diagram, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.